Hello, and welcome back to the Talent Pieces podcast. I'm your host, Carlos Delcid. And here, we talk all about talent and culture for entrepreneurs, startup founders, and business leaders looking to scale their companies effectively. If you find today's session helpful, don't forget to share it with fellow entrepreneurs and follow the Talent Pieces podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Hi, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of the Talent Pieces podcast. Today, I have Marcia Torres joining me from Portland, Oregon.
That's
Did I got that right?
You got it right. You got it right.
Awesome. Marcia, welcome to Atlanta. Very excited to have you here and, just so you can see a little bit of what Atlanta is about, their tech ecosystem, and how companies are scaling in our area. So, but before we get into all that, tell me a little bit more about who is Marcia and, how your career started from brewing manager, which, by the way, very interesting, to how you became, the CEO and founder at Imagen Talent Solutions, and, a little overview of how that was all about recruitment and talent acquisition.
Yeah. So, my background's a little different. So my background's in food science. So when I went to school, I had no thoughts of HR or business or anything like that, and was really focused on the engineering science aspect of food, right?
Especially good beer.
So awesome. I went to go, after college, graduated and went to go work for a small little company that makes beer here in all over the world, right? Anheuser-Busch, or as we know it now, AB InBev. And I started there as a brewing manager. I loved working there. It was a great opportunity that not a lot of folks get when you get right out of school.
Right.
To manage a team, lead a team, understand process side of things, understand the importance of efficiency, the importance of having, tight quality controls and those type of things, right? And so as I was doing that role over time, I became interested in the recruiting side. And part of that was just how my life was impacted personally, right? We had a lot of turnover going on in the manager ranks, which meant that we, as you maybe folks don't know, but brewing is 24-hour-a-day operation, 7 days a week. So if you don't have enough managers that are focused on that, you're having to cover. And some of the conversations I initially had with some of those folks that were leaving was, why are you leaving?
Right.
And a lot of them were like, well, nobody really told us what it was about to do.
What was the real deal for the job?
What did it mean to work shift work? What did it mean to manage a team of brewers? What did it mean to do the work? And that sort of turned the interest in the light bulb on to move over to recruiting. And I realized that one of the most important things that I carry with me in every role I've done, from being a recruiter to head of TA, is if you don't understand what that role is about, or if you don't understand what that company is about, whether it's the culture, whether it's the role itself, whether it's your stakeholders' requirements, or whatever it might be, if you don't understand it as a recruiter, you're no good.
Right.
You're no good to that company. You're no good to help them scale. You're no good to help them with growth. You're no good to help them with consistency and growth, right? So one of the things I've always found is, if I don't understand the business, I need to learn the business.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
It doesn't work.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you transition from the brewing industry overall, now in the talent and acquisition side and the human resources side, to your business now? Any other work experience that you can tell us about?
Yeah. So one of the things that during my time at Anheuser-Busch, I was fortunate enough to kind of learn a variety of different tools. And one of those was around process optimization, continuous improvement, some Six Sigma, all those fun tools, right, that we use a lot on a process engineering side or product side, right?
Right.
But it doesn't always translate over to HR, or it's not always used in HR, at least back when I had moved over to recruiting and HR side of things. We really weren't using those tools. We did not have standard operating procedures or SOPs for what you needed to do as a recruiter. We didn't have necessarily really fully identified key performance indicators or KPIs for us to know, where's the funnel, right? Where's that hang up that we have in our process, right? We kind of went based off gut on what we thought. Right?
This guy seems to be a very good fit.
Yeah. But I don't know. Why are people leaving? I don't know. I think it's because of this, right? And so with that knowledge that I gained during my time at Anheuser-Busch, I've taken that and applied it to the different TA roles that I've done in the different industries. So I've done everything from, food and beverage to consumer goods to defense contractor, vacation property rental management. At the end of the day, they all have similar processes, but each one has their own unique needs.
Right.
So whether you're a startup, whether you've been around for 100 years, there's still opportunities to improve your process from a recruiting standpoint. And usually, typically on the talent acquisition side, they're probably the ones that get the least attention paid to them.
Yeah.
Right.
And, I always talk to my team in terms of, especially of what we do at Puzzle, our core departments, our pillars are talent acquisition and sales. Mm-hmm. Like you gotta get new business opportunities coming up, but you also have to convert. If not, it's not gonna grow, right?
Right.
So that's why I've always seen recruitment as a pillar, and just how my career started. I went all the way up from recruiting assistant, starting and going all the way to recruitment manager, corporate recruitment. But I remember, and I guess this is very important to your point of helping people define what's their career path and if they're the right fit for the business. Mm-hmm. I remember, again, I started in the call center industry. So back then I was a call center agent, and I had the opportunity to become either a production supervisor or a recruitment assistant. And I was like, well, I definitely want to try something in the human resources recruitment area, right, especially because I felt it had impact in people's lives, like Absolutely. Getting them a job opportunity that 100%. They were actually going to enjoy and they were going to be a good fit for.
Right.
And I think that's the core, right, of what we do as talent acquisition, is not just identifying what the company needs, but making sure that you're also fulfilling what the candidate is looking for.
100%. And that's one of the reasons why I think employer brand is so important,
right,
and candidate experience, right? So those are things that you are either, and I've seen companies where they're like, oh, company brand is 100% important and should be the most important thing. Agreed. However, company brand and employer brand are not the same thing.
Right.
They're two different things, right? And sometimes companies over-focus, and it's something I also caution with like startups. It's like, okay, yes, I understand your company brand is important, but if you don't have your strong employer brand, you're not going to be able to scale and grow, right? You're not going to be able to attract the people that you want to attract to come work for you. And to be able to bring that skills, bring that diverse set of thought to your organization, which is what you're looking for.
Yeah, no, and look, I will never forget, and it helped me kind of keep pushing on that mindset. Remember this article of the Google recruitment approach, where you are more of a matchmaker between whoever you're bringing to the company and the hiring manager, and it goes to just not just do you have all the skills and check all the boxes in terms of what the job is asking for, but at the same time is, will they get along? That's right. Important too for the job, like something that you're going to enjoy, that you're going to be able to build a team beyond skill sets. Yeah. So now that you have, you're helping companies with Imagen Talent Solutions. Tell me a little bit more of what you are supporting companies with, and what are they
what am
asking
I doing?
you? Yes. What are they asking you in terms of the questions they have from a talent acquisition perspective?
Well, I think it helps to share a little bit more of my story, right? So, as we all are aware, the market is a little crazy, and it's been a little nuts for the last several years, right? In terms of the economy and hiring freezes and layoffs, right? I mean, we see, you open LinkedIn, if you're a LinkedIn user, you open LinkedIn and you just constantly see green banners and layoffs happening. Right. I've been part of that group where I've been laid off several times. And I found that typically and this goes back to what you're saying, sales and recruiting are some of the pillars that you need in order to continue to scale and grow. But we're so quick to cut those roles when there's those impacts from the economy or hiring freezes. So one of the things for me that I found has been important recently is, as I put together Imagen Talent Solutions, is I want to find a way to help companies fix their internal TA teams, their talent acquisition teams, and their processes to be able to become more of just a recruiter, right? More than just finding people to fill a seat, right? They need to be valued business partners, and they need to understand the financial impact, the importance of, finding the right candidate that fits for the culture, optimizing the process so it becomes more efficient, creating a candidate experience that's memorable, because it's a proven fact that if a candidate has a terrible experience, they may not want to purchase your product in the future.
Absolutely.
Or they may not want to interact with your product in the future,
Yeah.
right? Depending on what you're offering. And so those things are things that I focus on, and I offer that to the organizations I work with, is let me help fix your internal talent acquisition process.
Right.
Because a lot of what companies will do, and again, I think there's a time and a place for staffing agencies, but you don't need a staffing agency to fill every basic role. There's definitely
Absolutely.
niche roles, right? That in niche areas that you do want to use a staffing agency. 100% agree with that.
Yes.
But you don't need to use it for a customer service role. You don't need to use it for a basic entry level role. That should be something your team internally should be able to develop.
Absolutely. But if they're looking for more technical jobs, more skilled jobs, think about Puzzle if you're hiring engineers right away.
Exactly.
No, and it's also very important to understand what's that successful strategy for the recruitment team. And it starts, I always mention this in the podcast, which is it starts with culture. What's your company culture? What's the type of people that you want to attract for your business? How have you, talking with startup founders, identified that or advise around building a strong culture for attracting top talent? Hey there, quick break. If you're enjoying today's conversation, don't forget to hit subscribe and give us those 5 stars. It will help us grow a lot. Now, back to our conversation.
It's really, again, getting back to understanding who your stakeholders are and why they created whatever organization they created, right? What was the purpose behind it? And understanding that purpose. I know one organization that resonated with me personally, right? It was a lot of my time during my Partner Hero is, trying to give back to the communities and where they were based, right? And ensuring that they were paying, above fair wages for the talent that we were hiring, and trying to make an economic impact in that location in those cities, right? And that's why they picked certain locations as to where they would hire. They hired in Honduras, they hired in Philippines, they hired in other global locations as well as in the U.S., but picked certain U.S. locations, right? And I think that understanding that premise sort of starts to understand, the importance of who you are, right? And understanding a little bit more of outside of just why they were created, but what they allowed for people to bring. And they allowed their employees to be who they were. Right. And so we focused a lot on being you. Be you here at Partner Hero was one of the things that we focused on from a recruiting standpoint, and ensuring that whether we were talking to candidates or whether we were interacting with community partners, it was focusing on those items of, economic development, being you, being the ability to bring your strengths to an organization to help them build and evolve. And from a talent acquisition standpoint, I think the team that we had there was an amazing team, right? And they were able to do so many things that there was questions as to whether or not we could do it. And working closely with the business development team and understanding what their growth strategy was to be able to find the right fit of talent and making sure we were also looking at the right market for the talent.
Great point there. And one of the things that I wanted to follow up on that is, you're mentioning now not just US-based talent, but international talent. Mm-hmm. And I think this has not been unique just to Partner Hero, but other companies you've worked for.
Right.
Tell me a little bit more of how there is a value on international talent beyond cost savings, because that's kind of already a given. We already understand that.
But we already know that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about what's that proposition that you have identified, and of course, how has that impacted companies, across the globe?
If you look at it if you needed something that was doing a 24-hour coverage, the easy one that you get to see is from whether it's customer support, IT support, tech support, whatever it might be. If you hire outside of the U.S., you can have 24-hour coverage. Yeah. Right. At a fraction, going at a fraction of the price. But beside that, you have folks that, I have worked with amazing talent all over the world, but I think one of the things I've found is there is just this burning desire to do good work.
Impact.
Right. And to make an impact and there's this level of resilience that comes from some of the international talent that I've worked with that I think is unique than sometimes what we see in the US. And, I'm born in the US, lived in the US my whole life, but I think we don't always have the same struggles, right? Personally, financially, career-wise, versus some other countries that maybe they do have those struggles. And when they find a job that they truly want to be a part of, they give it their all. Like, it is 110% commitment all the time. And it's go, go, go. And they're constantly trying to give their best. And again, there's those people everywhere in the world. I'm not saying that they're not in the US, but what I'm saying is I think what I found is there's always that level of commitment and an ability and sort of this resilience to do the work. I mean, I just can only reflect on my own experiences of working with my own international team and having, you know, teams based throughout the world that, you know, a lot of the times I have no concerns about what was going to happen, and, you know, I could let them do what they needed to do, and that was it. Best. Right. And there was no doubt in my mind that they could do that work.
Awesome. No, I absolutely agree. And same, you know, in my puzzle experience, I've been always very familiar with, you know, the Honduran market and the type of, or the level of talent that we can find locally. But as we continue to expand over the last years, now I've met amazing engineers based in Brazil, Argentina, Dominican Republic. Like, usually you think about the big hubs in South America, but then there are some people in Bolivia, Peru that I've been amazed by, right? So it's, to your point, is there is amazing talent everywhere around the globe, right?
There is.
And it's like building that strategy that can leverage, you know, the talent that you can have access to. And that goes to also, you know, international talent, but also on your diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. How does that, or what's the approach from a talent acquisition perspective that you have identified?
So one of the things for me is you know, DE&I is near and dear to my heart. Every role I've been in, it's been talent acquisition and DE&I, talent acquisition and inclusion and belonging, where I'm doing that role plus another role, or I'm working on community partnerships. So it's always been something that's near and dear to my heart. But I also look at it as it needs to be the approach where it's not siloed anymore. It just becomes part of the process of how you think on a day-to-day. Like any talent acquisition process, you've made it an inclusive process. You didn't have an additional DE&I initiative to support the process, right? It's already built in there. And rather than adding it on as an extra item, it's built into that.
Yeah, because that's one of the things that I was very curious about when I first started interacting with more bigger enterprises. Mm-hmm. It does feel like a different initiative.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't. It shouldn't be. It should be built by default.
Right.
So
it should be a foundation, right? It should be a foundational item that lives through all the layers and all the pillars of an organization. But sometimes we still, unfortunately, look at it as a separate, and it shouldn't.
Absolutely. No, and I 100% agree. Now, and this is what I love about what you're doing right now with Imagen Talent Solution, which is those early stage founders that you can be talking to or advising. Because you told me that you were doing some panels and some advisory also in Oregon, right? So how or what advice will you give to our audience that are, you know, startup founders that are scaling their businesses or they're looking to expand in a more effective way? How can they treat their international strategy and their DEI strategy?
How to integrate them?
Yes.
You know, I think for me, I look at it not just diverse of ethnicity, but diverse of thought.
Yes.
And again, there's so many different approaches to tackle a problem that sometimes having those thoughts and those experiences coming from other areas and other companies that are not US based, right, helps you see a whole different approach. I mean, I can remember there's so many times where, you know, one example is, you know, trying to recruit in China, right?
That sounds complex.
China's tough, right? You don't have the same accessibility to different systems and software, right? And Google and Facebook and LinkedIn isn't a thing, right? So what do, right? And it's really understanding that in each one of those countries, there's a specific way that you can help build up your presence and recruit that talent to come through. And so like in China, it's very heavy on WeChat. WeChat is everything, right? And that's something that as a company, as a US company, we had to learn when I was working at at Oregon Tool is,
Yeah.
how do we support our team in China and help support their recruiting efforts in China? And
WeChat.
we have to adjust, right, and pivot what information we're sharing, how we're sharing it, what is important from an employee experience as well and the benefit standpoint. So, for some countries, having a great meal plan available to them is critical.
Right.
It's important. It's important in Brazil. It was important in China for this company. But in the US, it's not something that was a huge benefit that they were looking for. And so when you start looking at the how do you bring in that DE&I is understanding what is important to each one of those countries and how do you focus on that and how do you bring that to them to attract that talent and that culture to you.
Right. No, it makes perfect sense. And that's also something that I've encountered, right? It's even as I see Latin America as a whole, like as an entire region, and we speak the same language, except from Brazil, which is Portuguese, but most of us speak the same language. But when we start talking about what it's important, how laws are managed, everything is very, very different.
It's very different.
Right. And that's where, we try to be a very strategic partner in terms of how, explain our clients how to drive around the region, right?
Yeah.
But it is something that if you execute right, if you put that into your planning, then it will stick around as part of your strategy, right?
Exactly. And that's why there's not a one-size-fits-all solution for everybody.
I agree.
Because if it was, it'd be so easy. Right? You and I wouldn't be here.
Where's all the fun, right?
And then there's no fun in it all, right? And if it was a one-size-fits-all, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. We wouldn't be, trying to figure out how to attract candidates. We wouldn't be trying to understand what works and what doesn't. It truly is. Every company has their own approach, and
a very crafted approach.
It is, right? There's sort of best practices that you have, but you still have to adjust those for each organization. And all I can do is bring best practices to you, and then look at what it is that you're currently doing, and look at where you want to go, and how do we put it all together?
How we make it better?
For you, right?
Yes, and how we make that roadmap, because not everything has or can be executed in day one. That's another thing. It's like it some time. Of those things take time.
Yeah.
Like every other thing, like if you're building your go-to-market strategy, it will take time. If you're building your product, it will take time. But while you're doing those two things, you can also think about what's my talent acquisition and culture approach to everything, right?
Yeah.
So because those are the A players that will take the business to the next level. So I think it's always very important.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So Marcia, thank you very much for making the time.
Absolutely.
Really
thank you so much for having me.
Our conversation. So thank you.
Yes.
And safe travels.
Thank you. And hopefully we'll be back soon.
Awesome. All right. And that's it for today's session. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to hit subscribe and follow the Talent Pieces podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. You will help us grow by sharing this podcast with fellow founders and entrepreneurs. If you have any questions or topics that you would like us to cover, feel free to leave them in the comments.